This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Brian Peña. I always join the Vito podcast, the best podcast in the United States.
This week's Tigers Talk podcast is brought to you by The Athletic, premium coverage for passionate Detroit sports fans. Tigers Talk listeners can get 20% off the first year of an annual subscription by visiting theathletic.com/DSP. And welcome to the freshest, the latest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Geronimo Chirco. And alongside me, as usual, is my sidekick and broadcast partner in fun, the Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. John, how are you doing?
Vito, always enjoy the time with you. Welcome to another week of podcasting. We got a lot to get to on this very fine episode. What do we got going on?
We have Emily Waldon, who will be joining us shortly from The Athletic Detroit. She is a Detroit Tigers minor league writer for The Athletic Detroit, so she has a ton of insight that you and I both don't have. I know you would like me to garner that insight, and that's why we're having her on this week's episode of Tigers Talk, and we'll continue to ride the pony, per se, for a lack of better terms and words, as we keep trucking along here before the start of spring training, which is rapidly approaching, as we both know here, Doc, too.
Well, the news of the week obviously was the Tigers Caravan, Tigers Fest, and then prior to Tigers Fest, something that made the news, something that a lot of people have commented on, and a lot of people have weighed in a negative fashion, is the fact that the Detroit Tigers made changes to their hat and their uniform. Now, here's the funny thing about the uniform change. I had been aware that in the history of the Tigers organization, they have made some changes to the uniform. But when I started to hear whispers that they were going to change to the more classic Old English D, not the big bubble letters, I was a little bit confused at first because I thought that they were going to actually move from the uniform that it is now to something else, to the one that was previously. And so my first reaction to you, I texted you, I said, "Oh my God, Vito, I hate it." And then I started seeing pictures of what it looked like. First and foremost, I absolutely love the new home uniform change. It's absolutely classic. If you follow us on Twitter, if you subscribe on iTunes, that's the Old English D that we use to, market the Detroit Sports Podcast, the Old English D classic, not the bubble letters. And so I do agree with a lot of people that say, wait a minute, if you're angry, a lot of people don't even pay attention to what's on the home jersey anyway. When I saw the new uniform with the better Old English D, I was super excited, and it was something that really got me excited, and one where if they want me to buy a new home jersey, I'm the guy, because I'm going to buy one, probably a home and away if it's the same logo. But now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, it's really fascinating in that the hat change is atrocious. To go from the old classic D on the new era hats to a huge D really kind of made people on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast and across social media really upset. They said that, look, this is kind of a design of a gas station hat. How can we logistically pay $30 for a hat like this when it looks so hideous? And many people are upset regarding the hat. But I'm kind of, a little bit surprised at the outcry regarding some changes that were made. Organizations have to kind of keep making changes, and you know why. It's not really for authentic purposes. It's so that they can keep pumping out, new material, new merchandise.
Something so about the Tigers that is exciting a little bit.
Something that can sell. Right? But at the same time, for me, thumbs up, way thumbs up on the uniform change, thumbs way down on the hat change.
Well, now the uniforms are a uniform, for a lack of a better term, for the hats and jerseys combined using the same Old English D. So I like that. Honestly, I never even noticed that they were two separate Old English D logos on the hat and on the home jersey. Never even noticed it. Now, is the D too huge? The D might be a little bit too big on the hat, honestly. And, I looked at it. I saw the hat by hat visual. And honestly, when they were, placed right by each other, I thought it looked really big. Now, I never even noticed that the D was that large or was going to look that big until you saw it compared to the old English D used on the Tigers hat. So for me, that stood out a little bit too big, maybe too huge of a D, you could say. But honestly, for the jerseys, the sake of the jerseys, it's now consistent from hat to jersey for the home unis. So I like that, and I think it should have been that way a long time ago. And once again, I never even noticed it as a Tigers fan, and as a huge Tigers fan and pundit too.
So do these changes make you want to go out there and buy new gear?
I don't buy gear anyways. I'm cheap, and I have to be cheap. Now, you have the big pockets, like we talked about before, the big DOC of the podcast network. You can afford it all. So I give you the right to go buy a jersey for me, too.
Okay.
And you have to get it like hem, though, so it's going to be even more money, a special size for me to make it fit me. But anyway, so you're actually interested in getting a new uniform because of the change.
But
okay?
Why are people upset regarding the home uniform change?
I think because it's a change from the vintage, authentic look of the Old English D. So those with the nostalgic feel and mentality, they're not liking it because of that. Now, for me, I'm not going to look at a little change and be up in arms because it's a subtle change. Don't you think it's very subtle, honestly?
No, the home uniform change.
It's subtle. The Old English D, it's a slight change. It's subtle, I think. You don't think so?
No, I think it's drastic.
Really?
Yeah, because the bubble letters are a little
How much do you look into jerseys? And I mean, maybe you do. I think other people do. I don't. I mean, that's just the honest truth.
No, for me, I noticed a noticeable difference in terms of the home jersey and the Old English D. I like the new one much better. I feel like it's a lot more clean, a little bit more sophisticated. I mean, obviously, the Old English D has a lot of tradition, and people don't like change all that much. But I love the new uniform in terms of the home uniform with the Old English D. But now the hat change, though, is too drastic, and I think it does look a little bit cheap.
It looks too drastic. It does in that aspect. Now, once again, the jersey for me is fine. I don't think it's too drastic. I think it's what it should be. I like that they're making it uniform once again from hat to jersey, it being the same all across the board.
Is it fair or foul that people are having this strong reaction regarding a change? Because people at your paper have wrote that it's an unwritten rule or something that's kind of like sacrilege to change a uniform as classy as the home uniform for the Detroit Tigers.
It's the unwritten baseball rule of years past. The old baseball fan out there, old school baseball fan, thinks that everything should stay the same forever because the Old English D is so classic, so vintage, so beloved, so respected. You use any adjective you want to throw out there and it applies to the Old English D used on the Tigers uniforms in years past. So I think that's why the old school fan especially is up in arms about it. But for me, I look at the Tigers, and from a bigger picture, there are more things to be worried about with the Tigers franchise right now than a subtle change in the logo on the jersey. And the hats for me are more drastic. The hats are kind of where I take a stand myself. I put my two boots into the mud and say, I'm taking a stand here because it is too drastic, the hat change. Everything else, though, for me, with the subtle, as I described it, the subtle uniform logo change, I'm fine with that aspect of it, and I'm not up in arms because, once again, I realize the Tigers have bigger fish to fry at this point.
Outside of the Tigers, do you have another uniform or another logo that you have kind of gravitated towards? I mean, the Cleveland Indians made news, I guess. They're removing Chief Wahoo as of this week. That symbol will no longer be on the uniform. Any other symbol, any other logo that really appeals to you across Major League Baseball? I mean, one of the classic ones, obviously the N and the Y. Many people gravitate towards the Yankees logo. I mean, you see it around town. You see a lot of people wearing Yankees gear and things like that. The Boston Red Sox. A lot of people, surprisingly, around these parts are Expo fans. They rock the old school and vintage hats and things like that. There's a lot of people. There's a market for that around town regarding people that are fond of vintage hats.
People love their baseball heritage. They love the nostalgic feel. Baseball is that kind of sport, very nostalgic. Now, really quick, you said the Chief Wahoo logo for the Indians is being removed. Now, it's not going to be going into this regular season. That change will take place leading into 2019, so it won't happen right away. And then some were up in arms about the fact that, well, if you're going to make the change in 2019, why not make it now?
Exactly.
And I agree. If you're going to change it, why aren't we changing it now going into 2018?
Exactly. I do believe that, many people... Do you feel like it was an issue that was, across the landscape that people were talking about? I really felt like it kind of had died down. I mean, I know that there are people... It did die down, and then they decided to finally make the move. Anything that's happened recently to facilitate the change?
It was downplayed of late. I think you're right. And the Redskins logo, remember, hasn't been changed. People, Native American tribes and members of Native American tribes have been up in arms about that not being changed and that Redskins logo should be changed. It hasn't up to this point. I think that should be changed for sure and sooner than later. And that's why I think the Indians, if they're going to institute a new logo or remove that Chief Wahoo logo from their jerseys, guess what? Do it now going into 2018. Why aren't you going to implement the change until 2019? I don't get that whatsoever. If you're going to make the change now, Doc.
All right, Vito, let's take our first time out. We'll come back with the featured guest of this week's podcast, Emily Waldon of The Athletic. I'm looking forward to the conversation with her. She's very supportive of our project as well, and she's got a lot of insight regarding minor league baseball. And we have to, if you're a fan of the Detroit Tigers, you have to educate yourself regarding the prospects in the minor leagues because that's who's going to be filling the roster in the next few seasons. So Emily Waldon will be joining us right up next.
And Doc, as you know, the Detroit Sports Commission is one of our fine sponsors at the DSP Network. And since 2001, the Detroit Sports Commission has applied its expert touch to marketing and to selling the Metro Detroit area as a marquee destination for regional, national, and even international amateur sporting events. And through the Detroit Sports Commission's help, these events have attracted thousands of visitors and pumped millions of dollars into our local economy. It is why Detroit is now not only the place where champions are made, but also the place where championships are played. To find out more about the DSC and all of the events they are bringing to our very region, please follow the Detroit Sports Commission on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports. And make sure to check out their fine website at DetroitSports.org. And now joining me on this week's episode of Tigers Talk via Vito's VIP line is Emily Waldon of The Athletic Detroit. And she writes about Detroit Tigers minor leaguers for The Athletic Detroit. Emily, glad to have you on, and how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thanks for joining me once again. And first and foremost, before we really dive full-fledged into breaking down the Tigers' top prospects, tell me about how you got involved with writing about baseball prospects.
You know, funny enough, it really wasn't my first choice when it came to deciding what my avenue for writing was going to be. Of course, everybody wants to write about Major League Baseball and all the big names, you know, the Miguel Cabreras and the Justin Verlanders. But because of my location, living in West Michigan, I'm actually right near their Class A affiliate, the Whitecaps. And so my editor at the time said, hey, what do you think about doing some Whitecaps coverage? And I just sort of created this little empire, if you will, where I really got to dive in, get to know everybody from all of the respective affiliates, and then just sort of expanded from there, doing some work with some of the Blue Jays stuff now, some of the Padres, and just sort of building myself out a little bit. And it's really been an incredible opportunity.
And Emily, I'll admit it, I need some help. Okay, I need to gain some insight on Tigers' top prospects. And, you know, my co-host, you heard from him, John, already. He's made fun of me before about not knowing enough about Tigers prospects, so it is time for me to be educated, and that's why we have you on this week's episode of Tigers Talk. And to start off, you know, the Tigers farm system in recent memory hasn't been the greatest, the most highly touted, the most highly respected. Was ranked dead last among all 30 Major League Baseball clubs as of 2015, that recently by Baseball America. Now, I saw from a tweet of yours that Baseball America now has ranked the Tigers farm system 21st. So improvements have been made. Now, how would you say the Tigers have improved, and how much would you say the Tigers farm system has improved since 2015?
Oh, it's come leaps and bounds. I mean, the fact that it was ranked dead last out of all of the teams tells you something right there. And something that's really been impressive to me is what a pitcher-heavy system it's become. There was a time when Michael Fulmer was really the only quote-unquote prospect. Obviously didn't stay at the minor league level for very long and got up to Detroit. He was really the only name that they had as far as arms. And so now you've got the Bo Burrows and the Matt Mannings, Alex Faedo, who's going to make his debut this year. Some really, really impressive arms. And so I think the fact that they've come so far in that regard, still have a few voids to fill in the position player area, but definitely making some huge progress. And jumping from last to 21st is something that I'm very, very impressed with.
And Emily, as you know, Franklin Perez, Alex Faedo, Matt Manning, all ranked in Baseball America's top 100 prospect rankings. And then you look at MLBpipeline.com, they also included Bo Burrows in the top 100 of their top 100 prospect rankings. So you see these multitude of prospect websites that rank these prospects, come out with their top 100 prospect rankings, and they vary. They typically do vary from site to site. So I've got to ask you, to get more informed here on this week's edition of Tigers Talk, which prospect site is a one that I should trust the most?
It's a good question. It's also a hard question because a lot of the opinions of all of the sites are very subjective. Something I've always told people is that scouting in general, it's an opinion-based process. And so you're going to have people who notice different aspects of a player. They're going to see more future projection where some people may not see as much. So it's really kind of on a person-by-person basis. And so what I always tell people, don't take those lists as gospel. I think a lot of people do, and that's why they get so fired up if they don't see their favorite names in there. But I think across the board, even though they do vary a little bit, I agree for the most part with the rankings of those groups. I think the fact that they all have pretty much recognized the same players, it shifts the spotlight to what a pitcher-heavy system Detroit has. So to have guys like Franklin Perez, who was also ranked the year before, but it was just prior to him arriving with Detroit. That was when he was still with the Astros system. So it's showing that they've got some arms that are really going to be impressive over the next few years. And I think in general, I think they're all pretty much good across the board. There's a few little details, but again, it's opinion-based, and so it's something you really have to kind of take with a grain of salt.
Yeah, Emily, I always go to theathletic.com/DSP, and that's the first spot I go to in order to find out your work and read up on what you're bringing to the table. But a lot of fans in Detroit, they start peeking at the minor league players right around the time they start getting called up. Who are the 2 or 3 players that are currently in the minors that are likely to get to the big club first?
Yeah, I think that we're going to see some stuff probably, as far as arms go, I think we could possibly see Brian Garcia. He's somebody who was kind of rumored to come out of the bullpen for Detroit this past fall. Didn't get called upon, but really had an impressive year last year. He jumped all the way from Class A West Michigan, made it up to Toledo. I think he's somebody that the Tigers will test out a little bit. Michael Gerber is another one who's probably going to see some time in the outfield. And then there are some rumors that we could see a little bit of Kristen Stewart bat as well. He's made some really impressive growth as far as his off-speed recognition. That was a little bit of an issue for him for a while, but he's growing a lot, and he's a hitter. He's a full-on hitter. His defense is unfortunately below average, but his bat is really going to sell himself. So as long as he's able to maintain, we could definitely see him a little bit later on this season.
But definitely, the Tigers' farm system is so farmhand, pitching dominant. It's really lacking top-tier positional prospects across the board, in my opinion. Now, you noted a few guys to be excited about that are positional players. But, for me, it looks like Franklin Perez is no doubt the consensus number 1 prospect in the Tigers' farm system currently. Do you agree with that being the case, that Franklin Perez is the best prospect in the Tigers' farm system right now?
I definitely agree with that. I think that he draws a lot of comparison to Matt Manning because they're both very close in age. They have very similar builds. They have similar pitch mix. But I think as far as comparing the two side by side, I think Perez has more feel for his pitches. I think Manning is still in the process of polishing some of that. I think he's someone who's definitely be very excited about the year Manning's going to have. But I think comparing the two, Perez has a little bit of age on Manning, which I think adds a bit more maturity. Manning's a former 2-sport athlete, so having to transition from being a former basketball player to moving into pitching full-time, I think has been a process as well. So definitely more feel there for Perez, but Manning isn't far behind at all.
And you know what? As Tigers fans too, Doc and I, we want to see these young guys come up and really produce immediately. And the thing is, I know it's really not possible. It's a dream, really, to expect that out of these guys right away. But, Franklin Perez is one of those noteworthy guys, once again deemed as a top prospect in the Tigers farm system currently. And a lot of people think he's going to beat money and be an ace caliber starting arm right away. And we want him to get up ASAP. So I've got to ask you, Emily, with your deep knowledge of these prospects, when should we expect Franklin Perez to reach the bigs?
I think we could see him later in the year. I'm going to go probably a September call-up for him. It's going to be interesting to see how aggressive the Tigers move him. He came out of Double-A last year, so my guess, unless they feel really confident, my guess is they put him with Erie at least to start the year, and then could accelerate him into Toledo with consideration for some major league appearances later on in the season. But I don't see any real reason to push him. I know it's hard to explain to a fan base to not rush these guys, especially with the state that the Tiger system is in right now. But you definitely don't want to burn a guy out. You don't want to, mispace his development, and you want to do it on a player-by-player basis. So I think definitely later in the year is probably when we can expect to see him.
And Emily, I'll give you this much. I know it's hard to give a long-term outlook, but I've got to put you on the hot seat here. What do you expect from Perez, from Manning, from Faedo, from Burroughs as major league arms?
I think we're going to see more moves than not to the bullpen in the future. I think another guy to add to that mix is Kyle Funkhauser, who he fell off the grid a little bit because of his injury that ended the season with elbow inflammation. But he's another one that I think is really going to push for some serious consideration to move forward as well. I think out of the bunch, you're going to see Perez as a front-end starter. I think Manning could be a front-end starter. Some of the other ones, not quite sure if they're going to stay in a starting rotation role. They could come out of the bullpen. So I think they're all on a really good track right now. Some of them are moving with a little more fluidity than the others. But there's a chance that we could see all, if not more than that, at the major league level in the next couple of years. But it's just going to take some time to see how they develop.
The Tigers in recent weeks have made a series of minor league signings, including bringing back catcher Brian Pena. Any names that we should pay attention to among the recent signings?
Yeah, I think a couple who are actually still doing some pretty good stuff in the Dominican League is Edwin Espinal and Ronnie Rodriguez. They're both two very multifaceted infield prospects. Rodriguez especially. He's actually played, I want to say he played 6 positions last year. Primarily a second baseman. He's mid-20s. I want to say he's about 25. Really a very versatile guy defensively. So I think with all the infield competition that the Tigers will have this year, we could see some surprise names come into the mix, depending on how their spring training plays out. But those two for sure, I think are going to push for consideration, and we could see some really fun names coming into Toledo for sure.
Now, a positional prospect, Emily, that really excites me is Daz Cameron, the son of former longtime Major League outfielder Mike Cameron. And Mike Cameron, as you know, Emily, was a darn good outfielder. Could cover a ton of ground out there in center field and could hit for power as well. So if Daz can become anything close to what his dad was at the Major League level, I mean, we're going to love it, and love it extremely as Tigers fans. So right now, how excited should we be about Daz Cameron and his potential? And it is worth noting, too, that Keith Love, all guys, I know he's a hard critic, too, when it comes to evaluating prospects, and he ranked them in his top 100 prospects entering 2018.
He did, and yes, Keith has some very specific tastes in his prospects.
Yes, he does.
Definitely, it's a nod in the right direction for Daz, and I think Daz is going to have some really, really fun stuff to watch this year. I don't think that fans really got a chance to see him at full strength because he came in late in the year, didn't get a ton of exposure. He got some extra reps because the Whitecaps made it to the postseason. So give him a little bit more time, but really the type of guy that I think could develop into a very well-rounded guy on both sides of the ball. They've called him a 5-tool player. I haven't seen all of it yet, but I think there's just some really natural makeup there. And I think with a little bit more polish, you're going to see some really good stuff out of him, but still a little bit young. So a little bit raw there, but some really, really good stuff to work with going into 2018.
Is he the Tigers' best positional prospect right now?
I would say that I would say he is. I'm just thinking through some of the names that they do have up on the top of the list. I think I would put him at the top of that as far as positional talent goes. It's a lot tighter competition pitching-wise on the prospect list. But, yeah, I would definitely put Cameron up near the top with a few other names that are starting to climb the ranks as well.
So I could harp upon the fact that the Tigers lack an extreme amount of positional prospect depth. I could harp upon that for days here on Tigers Talk. Now, with the number 1 overall pick in this summer's Major League Baseball amateur draft, do you see them addressing that big-time void with positional prospects? And do you think it could be the case where the Tigers address it all the way throughout this upcoming Major League Baseball amateur draft as well, Emily?
It's something I really hope that they do address. It's going to be very interesting to see what route they decide to take because the Tigers have a track record of going pitcher in the draft. It seems like almost every year they go the pitcher route. And there's some pretty big arms that are available in the draft this year. And so I think it's going to come down to the Tigers evaluating that position, seeing what other names are available on the free agent market. They want to just try and balance it out that way. They could still go the pitcher route. So I think the ball is really in their court to make that decision on how it's going to impact them, especially moving into a rebuild year.
And so they're rebuilding. The White Sox have been for a long time, and they're ahead of the game when it comes to comparing the Tigers and White Sox farm systems. And Rick Hahn has done a hell of a job with the White Sox in revamping that farm system completely. Now ranked number 4 by Baseball America in terms of organizational strength. And you look at the White Sox, and they scare me as a Tigers fan looking at competing against them for the next 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5 years and beyond. And I just wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on the White Sox farm system, and how scary is it in terms of the depth and the pure talent that Rick Hahn has amassed on the south side of Chicago?
Oh, it's terrifying. I won't beat around the bush with that. It's a terrifying system. I think the move that they made, I would say in 2017, picking up some of those minor league guys it's incredible. I mean, they have built such a solid pipeline for themselves, and I think they're going to be incredibly dangerous. I'm hoping the Tigers are able to take some notes from how they handled that, hopefully fill a few gaps of their own. But no, the White Sox, among several other programs, are going to have some really, really fun guys coming up in their pipeline.
Yeah, it's a team to watch out for a long time, and my brother loves the White Sox. So he is so elated right now about the White Sox's potential and how good they could be in the future. And it could be a very interesting rivalry there in Chicago between the North Side, the Cubbies, and those South Side White Sox for years to come to watch out for as well. And obviously for the Tigers, they have to go head-to-head with them in the American League Central. And Emily, with that, I will let you go. Great insight provided by you. And how can we check out your work once again for all of those out there that maybe don't know how to check it out? And also give us your Twitter handle to follow, too.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find my stuff at The Athletic Detroit. That's where I'm putting up all my Tigers-specific work. And then also my Twitter handle is just Emily C. Waldon, Waldon. Got all kinds of fun stuff in the works and looking forward to a really fun season this year.
Well, Doc, I think I'm a little bit smarter now on the prospect front because of Emily Waldon. Emily, thanks once again. Great stuff, and we'll talk to you again down the line here.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys.
Interesting stuff there, Vito. I know that we've kind of talked about, our lack of, really looking into the minor league system. But when the Detroit Tigers go into a full-fledged rebuild, unfortunately, you have to shift your focus. And Emily is one of the quality minor league writers, and definitely, no doubt about it, check out theathletic.com/DSP to support a great organization there at The Athletic. I've really learned a lot. I'm being really serious in that I've checked it out. I've read a lot of Emily's work, and that's how I generated that great question regarding the new signings that have taken place. A lot of the signings that you pointed out to me, because I'm like, hey, what do you think about this guy? And I'm like, hey, what do you think about this signing? And you're like, Doc, relax. These are all just guys that are signed to the minor leagues. There's actually a very small chance they're actually ever going to be called up to the big leagues. But what has to happen is an organization has to fill in that pipeline. You have to fill the team in the minors. And so it's been interesting to kind of look into and peek into what's going on at Erie and Lakeland and Toledo and things like that. And Emily does a great job. So what did you take away? What were your highlights from the interview?
Well, how she's excited about Stewart, about Michael Gerber, outfielders. Daz Cameron is raw, but she's excited about him. And you know what? It's hard to gauge how good these guys will become, to give a long-term outlook, as I put her on the hot seat, didn't I? I mean, regarding a few of those arms, the top arms in the Tigers farm system currently. And she couldn't provide a long-term outlook exactly because it's too hard, and nobody can. And you see, I think the top two guys, pitching-wise, are Franklin Perez, are Matt Manning. The two of them could be bona fide top-of-the-rotation arms for a long time. And the rest of the guys, Alex Faedo and Bo Burrows, are they starting pitchers? Do they have starting pitching material? They might not be good enough to crack it at the major league level in a big league rotation with the Tigers or somebody else. But they're so young and raw. Once again, it's hard to gauge what these guys will become. And that's why you got to give Emily Waldon a ton of credit for what she does, scouting these guys and knowing what these guys are made of, and really just knowing what's up when it comes to Tigers minor leaguers at large, Doc.
So are you committed to furthering your education regarding the Detroit Tigers minor league prospects? Anybody catch your eye outside of the big names? I mean, I know you're just a guy that looks at all the big wigs and all the big names like a Bo Burrows and a Matt Manning and the future #1 draft pick. Anybody else catch your attention?
Well, I think two guys that she brought up. Stewart, he could be a powerful, a power hitting outfielder. Can he field, though? Will he hit for power at the major league level? He's a guy that excites me that Emily thinks should be up at some point this season. So, but the thing is, too, you got to tame your expectations, don't you? Because it's hard for us as Tigers fans seeing what we have to work with, what we have to root on. It's going to be a long season, so we want these young prospects to come up and produce right away, but it's not realistic. And Emily said it herself. You have to caution yourself, and we've got to tell all those Tigers fans out there that actually listen to this podcast every week, Doc, that they have to caution and just lower their expectations, because if they don't, they're going to be in for an even longer and tougher season for themselves.
Now, before we get out of here, I think you caught it too. One of the funniest moments was when Al Avila was, addressing the media, and a bunch of people stuck microphones in his face, and he was like, really, it was awesome to me because it was like, hey, that's the question I told Vito on the podcast.
That was good.
And they asked him, sell the fans on why the Detroit Tigers should come. And literally, if you didn't see the video, go to our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast because we highlighted it. All of a sudden, you start seeing Al Avila blink to death, and he was just blinking. He was so trying his hardest to sell. And you know what the first player that he mentioned was? Come down to Comerica because you're going to see Mikey Matuk. Yeah, baby.
Mikey Matuk, oh yeah. That gets me going on a Monday morning, baby.
I couldn't believe that was his sell job. He was blinking nonstop.
He wasn't selling. And you said from a psychological perspective, psychologist perspective, you could tell that he was nervous or didn't know what to say and was making up stuff as he was going along, huh?
He had no way of trying to sell the fan base on why to come to Comerica Park. I mean, literally, the easiest answer is, obviously, if that question's asked, okay, Vito, let's role play. I'm Al Avila. You're gonna be a reporter, junior reporter at some
junior reporter at some entity that you don't care about.
Exactly.
Thanks for the complimentary gesture when you bring up that I'm a junior reporter too. I love that you shower me with that appreciation. But anyways,
hit me with the question. I'm Al Avila.
So why should Tigers fans be excited about this ball club heading into 2018?
Well, Vito, it's nice to see you down there.
Do you know who I am? Do you know who I work for? No. Anyways.
Well, Vito, let me tell you, you know what? We got one of the Major League Baseball's premier hitters, Miguel Cabrera. I mean, this dude is working his ass off in the offseason, and I do believe that he's going to come back strong. I know the last couple of seasons have been inconsistent, but at the same time, it looks like he's coming back with a vengeance, and it's something that I think the fans are going to want to see. When you have a chance to have a player like a Miguel Cabrera come to Comerica Park 81 times a year, you don't want to miss out. Miguel Cabrera is a premier hitter. He's a true leader, and I do believe that anytime you come down to the ballpark, he can electrify the fan base. So I would tell all the fans that, yes, we are rebuilding, but we do have one of the preeminent premier hitters in all of Major League Baseball. His name is Miguel Cabrera. Come down. Each and every game we'll have an opportunity to play a competitive brand of baseball, and it'll be really exciting. Come down, see Miguel Cabrera. He is, like I said, one of the top-notch players, and I really do believe that he's going to have a comeback season for the ages. You don't want to miss out. Tell me that wasn't fucking awesome.
A comeback season of epic proportions. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid.
That was awesome,
bro,
wasn't it?
Did you see what happened with Miguel Cabrera in 2017? Did you watch any of that season for Miguel Cabrera at the plate and how horrible he was all season long? Come on, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid there, man. But that's what you should say. That's what Al Avila should have said to spin it positively for the Tigers organization heading into 2018 as a Major League Baseball team, not as a minor league squad, AAA Toledo squad, AA Erie squad. We're caring about the Major League product. How is it going to look? Excite us a little bit. He didn't excite the fans with his comments. You're right. Mikey Matuk is the first guy you bring up, the first guy that comes to your mind. You know he was struggling then to get names out. He obviously forgot about Michael Fulmer.
Yeah.
Right? How about Michael Fulmer? He's going to be healthy now for the start of the regular season. That guy doesn't excite you? He's a guy. He's one name on the Tigers roster right now that gets me excited on a Monday morning. There's not many other guys, including Miguel Cabrera, but he could have brought up Miguel. Mikey Matuk, he had a good second half, and that was it. You kidding me, man?
That was hilarious.
God.
That was funny, and I think we'll leave on that note. Al Avila, I mean, look, literally, I just said that on the top of my head. I might even use that as a preview video, among other videos as well. You liking the videos that I'm doing for Tigers Talk?
As long as you make me look good.
I know the question I'm going to feature that you asked.
You, actually.
Yeah.
Good one? So I asked a good question.
You asked a good question.
How many good questions? 1, 2?
I'd say 2.
Good. I love it. And you asked One
One.
question. So
That's about it.
2-1. So I win, right?
Well, the good thing is Emily goes on a lot of shows, so if she wants to come back, that's always a good thing.
Yes,
right?
I think she will come back, and I would appreciate her coming back because we need to gain even more knowledge of these Tigers prospects.
All right, Vito, let's get out of here. Great week talking Detroit Tigers baseball. Obviously, we'll have more banter, more talk regarding what's going on with the Detroit Tigers, what's going on with the manager, Ron Gardenhire, and things like that as the offseason progresses here in the winter ahead of spring training. Good stuff, Vito.
Adios, Doc. Adios to everybody out there that tuned in to this week's episode of Tigers Talk as well.